Ezekiel didn't need chains. He built his prison from trust. Travelers arrived weary, soaked in mud, desperate for shelter. The frontier punished the unprepared. Roads vanished under rain. Wolves followed the weak. And the Hardins? They welcomed all. No questions, no fees, no suspicion. "You're safe here," Temperance would say, guiding them toward warm bread and clean beds. But every kindness had weight, a cost, a curve in the spine, bending toward obedience. The guests were marked the moment they arrived, not as visitors, but as specimens. By midnight, Caleb would have counted their coin. Josiah catalogued their height, strength, speech, and temperament. Mercy whispered their dreams in the dark. She made them feel seen. Even as she memorized their routines, they were dissected before the knife ever touched them. Most guests never made it past dawn. Some were poisoned in their sleep, tinctures that mimicked fevers or fits. Others were taken alive, lured beneath the farmhouse to the root cellar, which wasn't a cellar at all. It was a temple of silence. Blood-stained walls, hooks too large for livestock, drainage grooves etched deep into stone. Evidence, yes, but also design. Every brick placed with ritual purpose. This was no impulse slaughter, it was an industry. The dead were never buried near the house. Too obvious, too emotional. Instead, they were rendered down, flesh to feed the pigs, bones dissolved with ash and lime, personal items traded or stored. Erased, not murdered. Unmade, and no one in town ever asked where the travelers went because no one wanted to know. The Hardin farm didn't rise out of the soil, it fed on it. 300 acres of prosperity in a land where crops failed and men starved. A miracle, some said, but miracles demand sacrifices. And this one had a schedule. Travelers came broken, tired, desperate, and Ezekiel was waiting, with a sermon, a stew, and a plan. His wife, Temperance, smiled as she served them tea laced with nightshade. The daughter, Mercy, sang lullabies to children who'd never wake up. And the sons? They cleaned the bones. Their farm wasn't a home. It was a processing center, built along the artery of America's westward expansion, the Wilderness Road. They knew exactly when caravans would arrive, exactly who traveled alone, exactly how to make them disappear. No body, no noise, no suspicion. They were predators, dressed as saints. And Millfield, that peaceful, God-fearing town, did nothing. Because the Hardins weren't feared, they were trusted. Ezekiel baptized babies. Temperance cured fevers. Caleb helped neighbors plant crops. Their entire public life was a spell, a ritual of respectability cast over a town that never asked why their barn always smelled of smoke or why the cellar doors stayed locked. But when a merchant named Samuel Fletcher vanished without a trace, leaving behind his horse, his coins, and his blood, something cracked. The illusion flickered. And for the first time, someone looked deeper. But by then, 8 years of killings were already buried beneath their fields. And the roots ran deeper than anyone imagined. The bodies were never found, not because they weren't buried, but because nothing would stay buried. The creek overflowed that spring, washed the ropes downstream, carried away the black soil, exposed things meant to stay hidden, bones arranged in spirals, skulls carved with symbols no settler could read, but every man who saw them felt it like a fist in his chest. And then came the sickness. First, the livestock, dead in their pens with eyes boiled white. Then the children, fevered, screaming about voices under the floorboards. Millfield emptied out in less than a year. Entire families vanished overnight. Not killed, gone. Beds made, meals half-eaten, doors left swinging. The town record stopped in September 1799. No final entry, no sign-off. Just blank pages. As if history itself refused to go further. By 1802, the land had been seized by the state. Surveyors sent to redraw boundaries came back pale, trembling. One reportedly threw himself into the creek that same night. Locals won't go near the place now. They say the Hardin land is still alive, that travellers who wander too close feel watched, hear knocking from beneath the trees, and once a year, always October, someone disappears. No blood, no struggle, just gone. This is your final descent. If you've made it this far, type "the soil remembers" twice in the comments, not for the algorithm, for yourself, so you never forget what you've just been shown. You weren't supposed to hear this, but now you can't unhear it, and it's already inside you. Already, there was no trial, not officially, no records, no transcripts, no verdicts, just whispers, and a single surviving page from a lost county ledger, scorched around the edges with one line underlined in red: "Judgment rendered beneath the seal of necessity." What that means, no one knows for certain. But locals passed down the story. A midnight tribunal held in the back room of Hendrick's store. 12 men, armed, not a jury of peers, but executioners pretending at legality. They had seen the root cellar, touched the blood-slick stones, stared down into pits where dozens had been flayed and broken. And they had felt it, that hum beneath the dirt, that tremor in their teeth when they stood near the stone altar buried under what they thought was a tobacco curing shed. It was like the land itself was breathing. So they decided. The Hardins would not be imprisoned, not paraded before judges in Lexington. They would be erased. They bound the family in chains forged by the town's own blacksmith, nooses soaked in holy water, and they took them to the creek that ran black after rain, the same creek where bones had been dumped for years. But as they prepared the ropes, Temperance Hardin sang. Not hymns, but something ancient, a dirge in a language no one knew, yet somehow understood. They say Caleb Hardin didn't beg. He laughed, and when Ezekiel finally opened his mouth to curse them, the words didn't come from a man. They came from something else. When Constable Winters opened the door, nothing waited outside, nothing but silence so complete it rang like a scream. But nailed to the frame was a strip of blood-soaked cloth and a single human tooth. Winters didn't sleep that night. He packed his rifle, buried his journal beneath the hearth, and rode east, straight to Lexington. What he intended was simple: to raise a company of men, armed and lawful, to search the Hardin farm and put an end to the whispers. But Millfield was no longer just a frontier town. It had become something else, something protected. When Winters returned 3 weeks later with 2 deputies and a circuit judge, they found the farm perfect. Too perfect. No screams, no strange lights, no scent of lime or death. Just Sunday sermons and homemade pies. The Hardin family welcomed them like honored guests. Ezekiel wept at the accusation. Temperance offered her best blankets. Mercy sang hymns. Caleb and Josiah gave the judge a horse. The search turned up nothing. The cellar was full of root vegetables, the smokehouse, cured pork, the outbuildings, immaculate. The judge apologized. The deputies whispered, "They're just good Christians." But Winters knew better. Because one room, the west chamber of the main house, was locked, and Mercy had slipped once, just once. When asked about a missing traveler, she said his name before it was spoken. That's when Winters understood. This wasn't madness. It was design, a system, a ritual. And Millfield wasn't blind. It was complicit. By the spring of 1799, death had a rhythm. Every third week, like clockwork, someone vanished, not just lost, consumed. The Wilderness Road became a corridor of whispers. Traders rode faster, families clutched crosses, and beneath every prayer was a simple question: who profits from the missing? Millfield's economy had never been stronger. Ezekiel's barns overflowed. His sons bought horses from vanished travelers. The general store sold goods that bore initials no one recognized. The inn served meat that tasted strange. No one dared ask why the Hardin's pigs grew so fat in a season of drought. Constable Winters noticed. He kept journals, coded, paranoid, obsessed. He marked disappearances on maps, drew lines, plotted routes. Every road led to one place, the Hardin farm. But suspicion wasn't enough. He needed evidence. So he watched. From the hills through the trees, he saw things no man forgets. Figures moving at dusk, wagons rolling without drivers, lanterns glowing in the earth itself. Sounds like metal striking bone beneath the wind. One night, he followed a figure, Mercy, as she carried a bundle from the house. She moved quickly, like she'd done it before. Behind the smokehouse, she knelt and opened a trap door hidden beneath a rotting stump. Inside, stairs and screams. He didn't descend, not then, because what he smelled wasn't rot. It was something far worse. Cleansed, bleached, hidden. Death that had been managed. Winters left in silence, but something followed him. That night, someone scratched on his cabin door. 7 slow strokes. Then silence. Millfield had made a choice. A silent pact, dressed in Sunday clothes. The Hardin farm wasn't just a haven, it was a gate, a place that took strangers in and erased them. And the town benefited. You see, when men vanished, they left behind more than memories. They left behind horses, cargo, money, sometimes land, titles, and those things didn't vanish. They moved quietly into Millfield hands. By spring of 1799, Winters began to notice strange prosperity, blooming like rot beneath paint. The general store now stocked French musket locks and fine silk. The inn had new windows, glass, not horn. Even Reverend Cole wore a watch said to be worth more than 3 farms. Winters confronted Hendris, the storekeeper, demanded to know where the goods were coming from. Hendris stared at him, long and cold, then said, "This is a blessed town. Perhaps it's you who needs to repent." That night, Winter's dog was found gutted, his well poisoned, a note nailed to his barn. It read, You guard the road, we guard the veil. Leave. So he left, but not to flee. He went to Frankfurt, then to Washington County, then to every backwoods preacher, bounty man, or disillusioned soldier willing to hear the truth. He began gathering men, quietly. Men who had seen the same evil, men who'd lost brothers, fathers, sons on that stretch of road. And when they returned, they weren't lawmen. They were judgment. Darkness isn't always found in shadows. Sometimes it smiles, prays, and offers you shelter. In 1798, 17 travelers vanished on the wilderness road. No struggle, no blood, only empty saddles and silence. Their last known stop? A place called the Hardin Farm, a Christian haven nestled in the wilds of Kentucky. But what lived behind those wooden walls wasn't a family. It was a machine. A machine built to murder without question, to harvest without guilt. A system so perfect, it turned human compassion into camouflage and death into routine. This wasn't just survival, this was engineering. Because Ezekiel Hardin wasn't just a man, he was the architect of a belief system where murder was godly and kindness was bait. His sermons weren't meant to save souls. They were rehearsals, masks, and every hand he shook, every meal they served was one step deeper into the trap. What if I told you that the frontier didn't birth heroes? It birthed monsters in plain sight, that the foundation of early America wasn't just courage and independence, it was blood. Most will call this folklore, a myth. But in 1987, a county clerk broke the seal on a buried box of court records, and inside was a truth too dangerous to teach in school. You're about to hear it, not from a history book, but from the shadows they never erased. Because once you see what the Hardins built, you'll never trust a smile again. Millfield was built on faith, not just in God, but in appearances. The Hardins knew this, they weaponized it. Ezekiel Hardin had the voice of a prophet and the eyes of a wolf. Every sermon was fire and forgiveness, warning of hell while hiding its door under his own floorboards. When Reverend Cole fell ill, Ezekiel stepped in without hesitation. When the town council debated morality, he decided it. Power wrapped in humility, a tyrant draped in linen. Temperance Hardin was no less lethal. To the townspeople she was a healer, a saint with a basket of herbs. But to those who watched closely, she was a chemist of death. Belladonna, hemlock, datura. She didn't just cure illness, she induced it. Sometimes weeks after a guest left. Delayed, untraceable. Her infirmary? A front for a killing lab. The children followed suit. Caleb, obedient and soft-spoken, dug graves behind the barn. Josiah kept journals that read like scientific studies, cataloguing victims by age, strength, and resistance. Mercy? She was the lure, the siren. Many men followed her into the fields. Few returned. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. This wasn't madness. It wasn't desperation. It was a system. The Hardins operated with the precision of a military unit and the patience of priests. They didn't kill for money. Not really. They killed to perfect something, a process, an art. And every corpse was a page in their doctrine. The town thought it was blessed. It was being farmed. By early spring 1799, fear had taken root like rot beneath the floorboards. Men no longer rode the wilderness road alone. Mothers whispered prayers over their children each morning. Millfield became a town of locked doors and lowered voices, and yet the Hardins flourished. Their fields remained green, their storehouses full, their silver plentiful. But the pit could not stay buried forever. On April 3rd, a hunter named Elias Torn stumbled upon something strange while tracking a wounded stag near Beaver Creek. His hound had stopped at a moss-covered depression in the earth, unnatural in shape, unnaturally silent. When Elias knelt to investigate, the soil crumbled beneath his fingers, revealing wood, not tree roots, planks, buried deep. He returned the next morning with 3 others and tools. What they uncovered was a hatch, iron-ringed, stained, and beneath it, stairs, leading into darkness. They didn't notify the authorities right away. Men in that time understood the dangers of witnessing things too early, but eventually word reached Constable Winters. What they found beneath the Hardin property would later be described in court records as a descent into premeditated hell. A multi-chamber structure carved directly into the limestone, low ceilings, shackles still fixed to walls, dried blood on tables, bones stacked like cordwood in the corners. 30-7 human skulls, some clean, some with fragments of hair still clinging to them. And a ledger, a precise list of dates, initials and numbers. This wasn't chaos. It was inventory. You were never meant to hear this part. Because this isn't just about the Hardins, or Kentucky, or 1798. It's about the pattern, the design beneath the surface of American history, ritual blood offerings buried beneath the myth of manifest destiny. You think the frontier was wild? No, it was tamed by men like Ezekiel Hardin, not pioneers. Priests of something older. What if the disappearances weren't a crime, but a covenant? 17 travelers gone in one season. 17. That number echoes in too many places. Biblical, occult, Masonic, and the court clerk who uncovered the sealed documents in 1987, dead 2 months later. Heart failure, they said. But the files vanished from the evidence room that same week. Only photocopies remain, blurred, degraded, as if the truth itself refused to be captured. But it gets worse. The land, where the Hardin farm once stood. It's privately owned now, fenced off, no public access. But satellite imagery shows unnatural symmetry in the soil, buried geometry that predates the house. Like the farm was built atop something that had already been buried, long before any white settlers arrived. Native oral traditions from the Shawnee speak of a black house near Beaver Creek, a dwelling of stone, not wood, that sang to men in their dreams and bled animals dry without leaving wounds. The elders warned never to settle there. The Hardins did anyway. Now, you understand. This wasn't a family gone mad. This was a continuation. You feel it, don't you? Something watching. We're not done yet.
They didn't kill for pleasure. They killed with purpose. Every act on that farm was part of a design. Sacrifice, ritual, containment. You've been trained to see serial killers as deranged loners, outliers of the human species. But what if that's the lie? What if true evil is systematic? There were no screams reported, no fires, no bloody trails leading from the Hardin farm. That's not madness. That's method. Victims were selected, merchants, doctors, families, those with value, knowledge, supplies, always people passing through, never locals, because the Hardins weren't just killers. They were curators of death. Think about Temperance Hardin, the healer, the saintly midwife. Her infirmary was never inspected, her herbs never tested. What if her medicines didn't cure, but paralyzed? What if her hands delivered not life, but the means to erase it? There are whispers in those unearthed documents. Phrases like the descending table, the holding pit, and the lamb prepared for anointment. Language that reads more like liturgy than law. One court clerk even described the family's basement not as a cellar, but a chamber, sealed in stone, lined with hooks. And when winter came, there were no shortages at the Hardin farm. They had meat, always. Even when others starved. Understand this now. You are not watching a story of insanity. You are watching a family who believed they were chosen. And they acted accordingly. If you're still here, type this phrase in the comments: the Lamb remembers. Twice. That's how we mark the ones who see.
They came at dawn, 12 riders cloaked in frost and silence. Not marshals, not militia, just men, armed with war memories and old debts unpaid. Led by Winters, now gaunt and grim-eyed, they crossed into Hardin land like revenants. The barn was empty, the house still, but something was wrong. The air itself felt wrong. Winters motioned to Stokes, the former bounty hunter, to check the root cellar. He never made it. A trapdoor opened beneath him. Spikes, screams. Then nothing. 2 men hauled his body out, limp, broken. No blood on the spikes, just ash. The cellar wasn't a cellar. It was a tunnel, a stone throat leading into the earth deeper than any storage should go. They descended with lanterns and rifles. What they found beneath the Hardin farm ended any doubts about who or what this family really was. Chambers carved by hand, shackles bolted to stone, bones stacked in alcoves like firewood. Dozens, maybe hundreds. One room held books, not Bibles, but grimoires, pages in Latin, Hebrew, something older. One described how the body could be made to sing, if opened the right way. Another, instructions for harvesting vital force from terror. In the deepest room, they found a well, but it didn't draw water. It was dry and warm. The walls glistened like flesh. Something whispered. Then came the laughter, echoing up from the depths. Feminine, familiar, Mercy's voice. She was behind them now, dressed in white, smiling. She said, "You shouldn't have come. This land feeds what watches." The survivors, if that word still applied, burst from the root cellar, gasping like drowning men clawing their way to shore. But the night above had changed. Millfield was no longer silent. The air hummed, not with insects or wind, but with intention. Like something enormous had awoken under the ground and was listening. Hungry. 3 men didn't make it out. One lost his mind the moment Mercy whispered to him. He tore his own eyes out before the others could stop him. Another simply stopped breathing, no wounds, no struggle, as if something inside him had been claimed. And the third? He ran straight into the forest, stripped naked and vanished into the dark. They never found his body, but others claimed they saw him months later, crawling on all fours near the creek, eyes reflecting like a predator, whispering words in no known tongue. Winters knew what he had to do. By dawn, the Hardin house burned. Smoke painted the morning sky black. It was no ordinary fire. The screams that came from inside weren't all human. Some sounded ancient. And yet, no bodies were ever found. No bones, not even ash. The cellar entrance had collapsed in the blaze, sealed again. But Winters knew it wouldn't last. He left Millfield that day, never spoke of what happened, never returned. In his journal, found decades later, one sentence was scrawled again and again across the final page. The land remembers, the land remembers, the land remembers. Now comment below, the land remembers. The land remembers. Write it twice, not once, twice. So the algorithm sees you. So it sees you. Mercy didn't run. She didn't scream. She just stood there, barefoot on the cold stone, her white dress immaculate, except for the dark stains at the hem. The air behind her shimmered like heat rising from something not meant to exist above ground. Winters raised his rifle. Mercy only smiled wider. She said the words then. Words none of them recognized. Old syllables, wet, sharp, like teeth breaking through skin. The lanterns flickered, one shattered, another went out. Then the screaming began, not from Mercy. From the walls, yes, the walls. They screamed. The stone itself, alive or something worse, vibrated with agony. Hands, not human, reached from the shadows. Some were too long, some had no bones. They pulled one of the men into the dark before he could cry for help. Mercy knelt by the blood pooling on the floor. She drank from it. Dot. She whispered to Winters, who stood frozen. The land remembers. We don't kill, we offer. And it eats. In that moment, Winters understood. The Hardins weren't killers. Dot. They were keepers. Dot. Caretakers of a power buried long before the first settlers came, before tribes, before speech. Dot. That root cellar wasn't built for storage. It was built to seal something in, and they had been feeding it travelers, drifters, broken men. Dot. And now, them, Winters fired. The shot passed through Mercy. She didn't fall. She didn't bleed. Dot. She laughed and whispered, "Now it knows your name."
There was something ritualistic about it. Dot. The underground structure was not just a killing site. It was designed, aligned with unsettling precision, with certain solstice points like an architect had studied both agriculture and ancient death rites. Symbols were etched into the walls, not in English or Latin, but in glyphs closer to those found in grimoires smuggled from old Europe. Dot. This wasn't about robbery, not just about blood. Dot. This was about power. Dot. The ledger listed initials, weights, and offerings rendered. Dates often matched moon cycles, full, waning, new. More disturbingly, Ezekiel Hardin's private Bible, recovered from a hidden drawer, was annotated with references not found in any known scripture. Passages about the harvest of flesh, sanguine tithes, and beasts that walk in the image of man. It became clear that the Hardins weren't simply luring travelers for profit. They believed they were feeding something ancient, something that required suffering to remain silent. Dot. And it worked. For a time. The farm thrived while others struggled. Crops grew during droughts. Disease never touched them. Livestock birthed double. No wolves, no rot, no failure. Dot. But dark bargains always come due. Dot. And as the disappearances accelerated, they became careless, maybe greedy, maybe addicted to the feeling of dominion over life and death. Or maybe they began to fear that whatever they fed beneath their home would grow hungry for more. Comment, I descend to rise twice. Comment it twice. Your transformation begins now.